What's going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and Apple just wrapped up their Wanderlust event for fall where they announced all of the newest iPhones, the Apple Watches, and honestly, it's the most exciting event of the year. So let's just jump right into it. We're going to talk about the iPhone 15 Pro, the iPhone 15, the Apple Watch Series 9, and also the Apple Watch Ultra 2 briefly. But my favorite one is, of course, the iPhone 15 Pro. So the overall trend that I felt with the new iPhones was a design focus. It still looks like an iPhone, of course. It has a dynamic island, thinner bezels, but the rounded off edges and the different variations of material is what I found very interesting. And specifically in the iPhone 15 Pro, the grade 5 titanium finish is absolutely stunning. I've wanted to see a titanium iPhone for quite a few years now because the iPhones have honestly been getting heavier. And especially if you go with the Pro Max model, you're definitely gonna notice that. And so with the titanium material, I'm curious about the actual weight, but it's not only lighter, but also more durable as well, based on the grade of titanium that they've used. With the color options that are available, you have the raw titanium, you have like a white finish, and you also have a black and a blue finish. And the one that I think I'm going to be going with is the iPhone 15 Pro Max in the raw titanium finish. The screen sizes are still 6.1 and 6.7 inches. On top of that, when it comes to the specs of the inside, it uses the A17 Pro Bionic chip, which has a 6-core CPU and a 16-core neural engine, as well as a 6-core GPU that is 20% faster. It is a completely new GPU with the Apple design shader architecture. And one of the other biggest hardware upgrades is that the phone now utilizes USB Type-C, and it has its own dedicated USB-C controller. When we actually get our hands on the phone, we're gonna go ahead and test out the speed and see how it actually performs. But we also saw in the keynote that they've actually had this phone tethered to a display to be able to shoot photos in a studio scenario, so I do feel like it should have Thunderbolt level speeds. One of the biggest areas that I was wondering about though is the battery life. It still has all-day battery life, but there's no word on the actual real-world improvement, and I'm hoping that with the improvements to the CPU and GPU, it focuses a lot on efficiency with the 3nm chip, because I personally found that on this smaller model of iPhone 14 Pro, the battery life was not that good, especially towards the end of my year-long usage. But on the larger model, I didn't really have that issue, but I'll be curious to see on both models how the battery life is able to compare, especially with the higher peak brightness on the display of up to 2000 nits. The other small touch is the action button on the side that you can go ahead and customize instead of just having it be a mute switch, and I think that is going to be something that I'm going to utilize. I don't find that I use the mute switch that often, so that is great to see. For some people, the biggest upgrades when it comes to the Pro model of iPhone each year is the camera technology. The camera on the iPhone 14 Pro is already really good, but this year there are some small upgrades throughout the main two cameras, whether it's the ultra-wide or the primary, but specifically in the telephoto is where we were looking for upgrades for many years now. The iPhone 15 Pro Max specifically has a 5x telephoto camera with a 120mm focal length, whereas the 15 Pro has a 3x. And they give you the focal length of 24, 28, and 35mm. Honestly, I feel like this year, the iPhone that I'm gonna be going with is the iPhone 15 Pro Max in the raw titanium, because the 5x camera is something I'm really excited about, but also the fact that the phone is going to be noticeably lighter, and that is a pretty easy decision. I think in the past few years, I was kind of on the fence between like the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max, as well as the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. And in both years, I leaned towards a smaller smartphone, but I think this year is a year that I'm gonna be going back to the larger model, and even perhaps without a case at all. The standard iPhone 15 though also saw some really amazing upgrades, and I almost feel like there was more upgrades in this model than the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, because those are a little bit more specific to what you need out of a smartphone. The iPhone 15, first off, has a nice new design that is rounded off and very similar to the look of the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, but the back is actually no longer a glossy finish. It is a color-infused glass that has the etched and textured matte finish, and I think that'll feel really good in the hand, and you don't have to worry about like fingerprints and stuff. And between the iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Pro, I just love how it tapers on with a bit of glossy highlight around the camera elements. The color tones are like neutral but playful, and I think the pastel colors are really cool. And I know they've alternated between a few different types of color options, but the ones that they've narrowed down to this year, look really, really good. And for those who feel like they missed out on Dynamic Island is now on the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Plus as well. And with expanded functionality that comes through the new generation of iOS, I'm really excited to continue to see how it can be utilized. And as the year went on, since the introduction of Dynamic Island on the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, I found that more apps are starting to utilize that Dynamic Island more effectively than when it was first released. So if you've been waiting a year for that feature, I feel like now is a really good time to finally have it across the lineup, because in the beginning, it was still being adopted by a lot of different developers. The camera, on the other hand, has the 48 megapixel sensor that you find on the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. It'll enable you to capture amazing detail and great low light performance, but at the same time being able to crop on images, which is probably the most useful feature of being able to capture in 48 megapixels. The chip, on the other hand, is the A16 Bionic with a 16-core neural engine, a 6-core CPU, and a 5-core GPU, and a 2nd-gen ultra-wideband chip. One of the interesting features about the SOS mode is that it's now been expanded beyond just emergency situations, but has features such as roadside assistance via satellite, which I think is more of like a common utility in areas where you're going on your little road trip and don't have any access to the internet. On the pricing side of things, so between the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Plus, as well as the 15 Pro and Pro Max, the pricing stays pretty much the same across the board. In the US, it is $799 for an iPhone 15 and $899 for an iPhone 15 Plus. And over on the Pro side of things, it is $999 for the 15 Pro with 128 gigs of storage and $1199 on the 15 Pro Max with 256 gigabytes of storage, and also the 5x optical camera feature. On the Apple Watch side of things, they also launched the Apple Watch Series 9. It features the S9 chip, which has a 30% faster GPU, and the 4-core neural engine is 2 times faster, and the display is brighter at 2000 nits. And it also has double tap gestures, for example, to trigger the camera, pick up a phone, and also end it. Between the chip and the display and the double tap gestures, those are kind of the features that sum up the Apple Watch Series 9. And over on the Apple Watch Ultra 2, I was really hoping for a smaller model because honestly, the current model of Apple Watch Ultra is just too big to fit on my wrist comfortably, but I do really want to check one out. But on that one, you have an S9 chip as well as the double tap gestures and a 3000 nit display. But honestly, if you already had a past generation Apple Watch, whether it was the Ultra or the Series 8, then I don't feel like this is the year where you need to go ahead and upgrade your Apple Watch because the updates are relatively incremental. But when it comes to the iPhone itself, I think depending on the user, some of these improvements are awesome. And personally, I'm really excited for a change in hardware for the first time in quite a few years. As always, we're gonna be bringing you guys unboxings, reviews, and all these videos about these new products. So make sure you let me know in the comment section below what you would like to see. And as always, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.